Right then, students, this is our fifth video in the series of independent learning videos for English language linear A-level, year 1. We've done word class, we've done lexicon and semantics, we've had two videos, 3A and 3B, on grammar, and this is on part 4 of the booklet, which is Pragmatics. So it's the fifth video, but it's on part 4 of the booklet. There's only one page, which is page 13, okay? And this is how I feel about it. This is it. The best time of your life. Better than going viral. Better than a Nando's black card. Finally, you get to watch a YouTube video on pragmatics. In the words of Sheldon Cooper, bazinga. Right, so I've given you this example as a way into understanding what pragmatics is. Pragmatics is about sort of implied meanings in texts, or more broadly, meanings in context. So can you see that there are sort of meanings going on that not everybody would get, or that not everybody would understand, or that you'd have to be there to get it, or you might think it's funny or somebody else might not. So how meaning can change depending on context. So if semantics is about denotation and connotation, pragmatics is about meaning in context, or meaning beneath the surface. It's not really about reading between the lines. It's more about, I don't really like that phrase, it's more about reading what's on the lines better, with an understanding of context. So you're not trying to find pragmatics in something, you're analysing the pragmatic level, or you're analysing the pragmatic features of a text. Okay, so on page 13 in the booklet, there are several. But you can sort of see the type of things we're talking about by the example I've given you here. This is it. Well, what is it? What is this? So this idea of not directly referencing something, but expecting the reader to know what you're understanding, that will be one pragmatic feature, which we'll see in a minute. The best time of your life. Well, that's exaggeration, isn't it? But do I really mean it? I really mean that this is literally the best thing you're ever going to do in your entire life is watch this YouTube video? I'm pretty sure it's not going to be good as Christmas. So in context, I'd sort of get you to understand that I don't really mean that. So that sort of ironic tone that you can use there, that will be an element of pragmatic meaning. Better than going viral. Does everybody know what going viral means? I don't think they do. It's a reference that not everybody would get. Better than a Nando's black card. There's probably some people watching this not even understanding what a Nando's black card is. If you don't, look it up. It's amazing, right? But isn't that so? There's a reference I not really get, but isn't there also a bit of a stereotype going on there? Dealing with stereotypes. If I'm doing a video for students, I don't know if you're aware or not, but it is known that students they like going to Nando's. It's usually the sort of the go-to restaurant in stereotypes for students. Oh, let's go to Nando's. You're always going Nando's. What about, finally, you get to watch a YouTube video on pragmatics, what you've always wanted. Sarcasm, the sort of least witty form of irony there. In the words of Sheldon Cooper, bazinga, well, we've got a reference there to the actual words of The Big Bang Theory, which again, not everybody has watched. You don't need to have watched it to understand that there is something going on there, that it's requiring something of you as a text. So meaning in context is what we're dealing with. Okay, so these are the terms that we'd expect you to know for the test on pragmatics. So you will have to understand them. I recommend that you take the terms you have here and come up with new examples yourself, or try and come up with different ideas or different ways of defining them and put those into your glossaries, which you're supposed to be keeping up with. So let's go through them. We've got cultural allusions. Please spell it right. It's an allusion, which means a reference, not an illusion, which means something that's not real or not true. So an illusionist is a magician, but an allusion is a reference, okay? A cultural illusion with an I would be like a magician who's very, very sophisticated. That's not what we mean. And these are references to sort of shared knowledge or experience. So nice one, Sherlock, that's a reference to Sherlock Holmes. More powerful than Hiroshima, a reference to the atomic bomb dropped in World War II, or sort of perhaps cultural references to different things we'd expect people to know. And the key thing about cultural allusions is that you personally don't have to know exactly what it's alluding to see that there is some form of allusion there, unless you think the writer's just gone completely mad and made something up, entirely from scratch. There must be something being referenced there, so it's a cultural allusion. Pragmatic references are sort of the sort of umbrella term for everything else we're talking about here. So just stuff we expect you to get. I suppose they just do it for the like. So I'd expect you to know what I mean. It's a shared assumption that's important there. Intertextual is sort of a type of cultural allusion, a type of pragmatic reference, where you're literally quoting or literally making a very clear and distinct reference to another text. And by text we mean sort of film, media, songs, TV, anything like that. So, well, as the Rolling Stones once sang, you can't always get what you want. So there's a specific quoting of another text there, here, the song lyrics of the Rolling Stones. So an intertextual reference means literally a reference to another text. Okay? So on to implicature then, that's the general sense of implied meaning, so meaning beneath the surface. So a hidden meaning that isn't explicitly stated. So if I sort of see students sort of chatting and talking while I'm trying to do a lesson, I might say, do you mind? And what I mean is the imperative stop doing that under the surface, but I wouldn't say that because it's perhaps a little bit impolite. So we all use implicature all the time. And incidentally, as we're sort of studying concepts and issues, and the issues of gender is coming up as well, one of the things that some studies have found is that women tend to use more implicature than men. Now, I'm not sure how true that is. You could do your own studies on it, and in the second year you get the option to study elements of English that you'd like to do yourself. But it's certainly something that has been explored, this idea of who uses more pragmatic meaning. And this leads us nicely onto the idea of stereotypes. So stereotyping is sort of a society's conventional view on a particular group. So it might be that stereotypically men are seen to be a little bit more sort of straight talking. They're seen to be almost a little bit more simplistic, especially emotionally. Whether that's true or not is a matter for discussion. But certainly, these are sort of stereotypes. So they're sort of easy go-to meanings that you can use. And you have to be very careful with them, of course, as well, because there can be things like ethnic stereotypes and racial stereotypes, which would very quickly lead one into sort of racism, which would be very, very difficult. So often you have to think about, is what I'm saying true, or is it just a stereotype? But of course, stereotypes are used all the time. I mean, as I say, we use that reference to Nando's. It is a stereotype of students that your favourite food is going to Nando's. It's a stereotype of students that you talk in a particular way. Whether it's true or not is a different matter. Another element of pragmatic meaning that's sort of not quite there but is sort of expected to be understood, would just be humour. It doesn't just mean jokes, it doesn't just mean an actual punchline, but it could be sort of wit, or it could be sort of a certain tone, or what we might call a tenor, a certain sort of humorous tenor or quality to a piece. So not just gags that make you laugh out loud, but perhaps more sophisticated humour or crafted. And really important point for this is, I sometimes have a bit of an issue with students here, is you don't personally have to find it funny to be able to analyse a text and go, it's trying to be funny. There's an attempt at crafting humour, because you're not necessarily the preferred readership of a text, and you might just personally not find something funny, but that doesn't mean that it isn't funny to other people, and it doesn't mean that it isn't, as a text, attempting to use this pragmatic feature of humour in order to have a different sort of effect on the audience. Irony comes in lots and lots of different forms. So in the most fundamental form, it's saying one thing and meaning another. But there's lots and lots and lots of different types of irony. So often it's about the audience understanding what you really mean more forcefully. So when I said that finally you get to watch a YouTube video on pragmatics, that adverbial finally there, it showed I was having an ironic tone. I don't really mean that we've all been waiting this forever. And it's one of the things that shows a more sophisticated understanding of a text. Lots and lots and lots of texts, even quite formal texts, so sort of broadsheet editorials and opinion articles, can use irony. They can say one thing, but they don't really mean it, or they're just taking an idea for a walk, or they're playing with a convention, or being playful, humorous and witty and ironic. And of course, sarcasm, again, on stereotypes. You may or may not know it is a stereotype of teenagers that you are constantly being sarcastic, so sarcastic that you don't know whether you mean it or not anymore. But that's the sort of what's seen as sort of extreme and unsubtle type of irony, just literally, oh, that was brilliant, when you mean the opposite. So very unsubtle and direct form of irony. Irony can also be things where sort of it's like someone's, sort of ironically named, like Britain's biggest dog was ironically named. It was called Tiny. So, you say one thing and you mean something else. And then finally, we've got this idea of deixis, or deictic references, or deictic references, and that's sort of verbal pointing. So, comes in temporal, personal, spatial. You can go into that a little bit more detail, but her opinion on that topic is expected next week. So you need to understand the context. This happens a lot in spoken texts. You're referencing things that you'd have to be there in order to know what you meant. Oh, this is brilliant, or what does this refer to? You might not know. And of course, anaphoric and cataphoric references will be one way of developing that deictic verbal pointing. Okay, so I would add tenor to that as well as an idea, tenor, this idea of a particular sort of tone to a text, a relationship with an audience. It could be humorous, it could be sophisticated tenor, things along those lines. And just to sort of finish off the video, I just want to show you a couple of quick examples. So often, sort of representation of gender is an issue with pragmatic meaning, playing around with stereotypes. So what we've got here is an original Daily Mail online headline, which is "What Baby Bump Tamara Eccleston looks at her best shape yet as she works out in a crop top just 1 month after giving birth." Now, obviously, there's certain things going on there. There are certain things, pragmatic meanings, that are certainly expected you to understand. But if you look at what this sort of humorous text has done, a humorous tenor, humorous quality, it's playing with that stereotype and also taking the mickey out of the Daily Mail. Woman has baby, then wears clothes. So that's playing with the stereotypes of gender, but it's also an intertextual reference to the Daily Mail and the types of thing it does. It demands you understand the original in order to get it. And sometimes you do get the situation where I find this quite distressing sometimes as well, where people don't get that it's a joke. So if you ever go on they're not really fake news sites, but they're sort of humorous news sites like the Onion, the Daily Mash. They're purposefully humorous news articles. They're not supposed to be taken seriously. It's not like fake news where it's trying to pull the wool over your eyes. It'll say quite clearly it's a joke, but it's sort of taking the mickey out of conventions. So that tenor, that relationship with the audience is slightly different. It's got a humorous and ironic quality. And then, again, in this original one here, Hilary Duff shows off shapely legs and skin-tight jeans and towering wedges as she takes son Luca to lunch. That is sort of just deploying stereotypes in a very unthinking way. The stereotype that women are sort of, parading themselves by happening to have legs, or that sort of, that even things like being a mother and things along those lines, or wanting to be attractive. Those sort of stereotypes are dealt with in a very unquestioning way here. Whereas, of course, in this humorous version, which is sort of intertextual reference to the Daily Mail, an intertextual reference to that particular story, and has a much more ironic and humorous tenor. The headline would have to be "Woman Has Legs." So it's sort of taking the mickey out of that particular thing. We've gone to politics as well, sort of satire, a satirical tenor, a satirical tone. That's where you're sort of being quite witty and ironic and playful, but you've got a particular political point you want to make. So I'm not endorsing any particular party, of course, by doing this, but these were some sort of humorous sort of memes that were doing the rounds on the internet a couple of elections ago. So it's sort of taking the mickey out of conservative posters that were all over the place with David Cameron's face. And on this one, and I would have got away with it if it wasn't for those pesky kids. Now, you don't have to know who this is to know there's some sort of reference going on there, so you could be able to get that even if you don't know. But if you did know, you'd be able to do more. This is a reference to Margaret Thatcher, so there's that pragmatic meaning, that cultural allusion to Margaret Thatcher there. And I would have got away with it if it wasn't for those pesky kids. It's actually an intertextual reference to Scooby-Doo, if you've ever seen that. And this is an intertextual reference to something called Spitting Image. So some of the things we could think about here is this idea of like a text presupposing knowledge, and you don't actually have to have it to know that it does presuppose a particular knowledge. The fact you don't know might be interesting. It's not designed for you in some way. Okay, so intertextuality, tenor, presupposition, some extra terms for pragmatics you could use there. And then on to another one as well, similar one as well. I grew up on an estate too, so there's David Cameron, former Prime Minister David Cameron. And of course, this one is dealing with several stereotypes. The stereotype of posh people with the word estate, this type of estate, a big country home. It demands that you know what that means. And then the stereotype of Burberry and Stella and cigarettes of, I suppose it's not a word I particularly like, but the idea of the stereotype of the chav in some sort of way. So dealing with those stereotypes, presupposing an understanding of the class system in Britain, presupposing an understanding of Conservative Party posters and politics in general, a humorous tenor, quite cruel in a lot of ways, really, and intertextual references. Well, possibly you could say there's an intertextual reference to certain things there, but it's more a sort of cultural allusion to general understandings of stereotypes of Burberry and Stella Artois and then posh people and things along those lines. Okay, so hopefully that's useful to you. If we just get back to, you do need to go through those pragmatic terms again, add new examples or try and find some examples and add them to your glossary, and then the test will really just be, I'm going to give you, it's quite a short test, only out of 10, I'm going to give you 10 examples, and I want you to identify which pragmatic feature is being used in those examples. Okay, that's the end of that video.